How's it going, everyone? This is International Master Daniel Rensch. This is Chess.com's YouTube channel, and today is a Freaky Friday. We're going to be looking at some freaky openings. Well, maybe they're not going to be freaky, but I can say that they will give you some of the general knowledge, some of the intro knowledge you need to one of the chess openings. If you haven't checked out all the chess openings videos we have in our chess openings playlist, then that's a you problem, because we have likely reviewed your opening. And if you don't have access to some potentially more in-depth materials, whether that be an opening database or a piece of software or some chess books where you have maybe purchased a chess book on the specific opening you play. If you don't have access to materials like that, then you should probably check out some of those videos, because the good chances are that we've covered your opening. So let's go ahead and do this. Today's quick intro opening is about the Alapin Sicilian, which is an anti-Sicilian. What we mean by that is that when white plays e4 and black plays the Sicilian, the main lines of the Sicilian, and there are videos on pretty much every main line within our chess openings playlist. The main lines of the Sicilian after knight f3, whether black plays knight to c6 or d6, when white plays d4, we've officially reached an open Sicilian. And essentially this structure is defined as white has given up the d-pawn, given black 2 center pawns versus 1, but done so for more open space and potentially more active pieces in the center. This is just the general philosophy behind what white is trying to achieve with the mainline Sicilians. We've covered the knight orf and the dragon and the Sveshnikov and all kinds of things, and the same sort of principle applies even against knight c6 on move 2, or even potentially e6 on move 2. The Alapin Sicilian is an anti-Sicilian, starts with the move c3, and every move that is not knight f3 and d4, a mainline Sicilian, is considered an anti-Sicilian. We're also going to be covering here the Smith-Morra Gambit, as well as a few other anti-Sicilians within our playlist. The main purpose of the Alapin is to support the move d4, so that when white plays this pawn advance, he can recapture it with a pawn rather than a piece. The advantage to this is that, let's say that black plays a normal move like knight to c6 or 2d6, like he would have on 2 knight f3, as we just displayed. Now when white plays d4 and this natural capture is made, instead of having a position where white made a concession by giving up a center pawn for activity, white has made no concessions in the center, controls more squares than black. And if you go by the classical theory of chess, the Nimzovich theory of chess, pawns on the 4th rank are worth 2 points, and pawns on the 6th or 3rd rank are worth 1 point. So white is potentially going to achieve better pieces and more control over the critical area of the board, that being the center. So d4 is a very clear idea, and it's a clear threat. What could be the disadvantage of a move like c3? Well, if you want to pause the video and take a moment to guess to improve your critical thinking skills, you can. But I'll just tell you that the issue here is that white has slowed down his development on the queen side, particularly taking away the square for this knight on b1. Now, the problem with that is that if black knows how to aggressively attack the center and chooses one of the more, let's say, theoretically accurate approaches to the Alapin, then white may regret having postponed this developing move. There are two main lines, and quickly before I show them, I will highlight again that normal moves like e6 or even like d6. Here black might play a move like d5 trying to get like a French structure, but if you know anything about the French, you might look at this position and say that black has all the disadvantages of the French, being that white has more space and more control of the king side, and black has no way to really increase pressure on this d4 pawn anymore because he's already exchanged it. He's also given white this square for the knight because of the early exchange. So e6 with d5 isn't really a real option. Again, as I showed d6, though there are some sidelines with d6, the main point of just playing d6 to capture like a regular Sicilian is going to be insufficient. Pieces develop, but in the end, if your opponent has much more control over the critical area of the board, they have a lot more options, and black is potentially going to be clearly worse in most middle games. So that's not the best idea for the most part. And the same can be said for 2 knight to c6. Again, after d4 takes. If d5 is played, we have a French-style structure, but again, without the real advantage of having more pressure to increase here and having already given white this square on c3. And again, if you don't quite know what the French opening is, then guess what? Check out our chess openings playlist. We've already covered that as far as the general philosophy of that pawn structure. So what black needs to do is be a little more aggressive to punish white for postponing this development. The two ways to do that are with knight to f6, attacking this pawn that would love to be defended by the knight but can't, or to play d5 either right away or at some point, breaking the general principle of bringing the queen out early, but doing so because white doesn't really have a way to tickle this queen out of her strong post in the center. So both d5 and knight f6 are strong. I've personally played knight f6 on more occasions than not, attacking the e4 pawn. The disadvantage is that the pony will lose a little bit of time. We don't like it when our ponies get kicked around. But what you've done here is induce white's pawns forward in such a way that after captures, knight f3, pawn's not capturable because it's pinned, knight to c6 and takes, black's most natural way to play in the center is to just simply attack it and try to undermine these critical points. And it's very easy to attack an extended pawn structure. This is not a French pawn structure where your pawns have been advanced, so you have no longer any way to undermine white's center. Rather, you have lots of ways to try to undermine this center, including maybe even the fianchetto of this bishop, where all your pieces are sort of developing with a togetherness and a sort of a collective purpose. So that's one way to play, generally, and some of the variations can be sharp. Here, white also has the option of bishop to c4 and either bishop by b5 or bishop to b3, sacrificing a pawn, giving black the chance to capture here. Variations like that are sharp, but also pretty equal. And, of course, in the main line after takes, d6, bishop c4, knight b6, bishop b5, again, the positions are pretty equal and playable for both sides. Black not having worried about giving these two pawns to white in the center because by inducing them forward, he has the chance to undermine them, as I highlighted. So that would be one way for black to play. The other way for black to play is with d5. d5 right away is very common, and after d4, knight to c6, knight f3, in many cases we head to a pretty standard isolated queen pawn position with black eventually capturing here, losing some time with his queen and white potentially having a more active and aggressive development. However, black is in a position to exert long-term pressure against white's center pawn. There's actually a video on the theory of that type of position on our main site on Chess.com this weekend, in fact. The other way to play it, and one that comes as a personal recommendation of Grandmaster Roman Djindjiashvili, a lot of people know him from Roman's Lab, and he's an author for us on Chess.com, with the move 2g6, with the idea of meeting this position with d5. The difference being than a normal French, for example, where this wouldn't be happy, is that black has not played e6 yet. What that does is in a lot of positions, on top of just developing normally, at some point he wants to get this bishop outside the pawn chain, maybe even trade it for a knight on f3, which will increase his pressure on d4. The lines are complicated, and again, you have to know the theory, but as far as a general outlook in terms of the purpose of the Alapin, being to achieve this positional advantage without any sort of sacrifice in the center, and black's different ways to counterattack it, then I think we did a pretty good job here as far as giving a general intro into this opening. So I put on my best serious pants for you guys today, my serious Sally face, my Nancy pants. No more crazy jokes, for all you lame people out there. If you're no fun in life, then I'm sure you enjoyed this video. Just kidding, but I'm not kidding. Don't worry, you're all smart enough and good enough. Go take a look in the mirror, Stuart Smalley, and I will see you around on Chess.com.